Australians will take any excuse to pack up and go. Whether it's a school break, the festive season, or a long weekend, we love every opportunity to visit this place. But with Western Sydney's population set to grow by 46% over the next 20 years, the region's aviation needs are soaring. That's where the $3 billion Western Sydney International Airport comes in. Opening in 2026, it promises to deliver a seamless travel experience, spark economic growth, and create new opportunities for the region.
Western Sydney Airport is a step closer to becoming our biggest airport. The main terminal is almost complete.
But the big question is, why build such a massive airport so far from Sydney's heart? And how will it change the region? Let's see. Before we dive into the Western Sydney International Airport, let's first understand Sydney Airport. The Sydney Airport has been operating since 1919, making it one of the oldest airports in the world. Located just 8 kilometers from Sydney's city centre, it sits in a tight spot. On 3 sides, it's surrounded by urban development, and on the 4th side, there's Botany Bay. Because of this, expanding Sydney Airport is nearly impossible. Any attempt to make it bigger would require either reclaiming land from the sea or demolishing existing suburbs, both extremely expensive solutions. That's why, for decades, there have been talks about building a second airport for Sydney. The idea finally took shape in 1986 when the federal government chose Badgerys Creek as the location for a second major airport. Over the next few years, from 1986 to 1991, the government began purchasing land for the project. In total, they acquired 1,780 hectares, spending around $170 million to secure the site. After purchasing the land, the government decided to take a different approach. Instead of building a new airport right away, they chose to expand Sydney Airport by adding a third runway. This new runway was built on reclaimed land and officially opened in 1994. But even with this expansion, concerns didn't go away. Experts warned that Sydney Airport would struggle to handle growing demand and could reach full capacity by 2030. The problem became even more serious in 1995 when strict night flying restrictions were introduced. With limited space and time for flights, the idea of a second airport resurfaced. By 2008, planning for a second airport was back on the table. A detailed 200-page study, released in 2012 by the federal and NSW governments, concluded that Badgerys Creek was clearly the best site for Sydney's much-needed second airport. This report strongly recommended that planning should begin without delay. Finally, on April 15, 2014, the federal government officially confirmed Badgerys Creek as the location for Sydney's second airport. 4 years later, in September 2018, construction work at the site finally began. On March 4, 2019, the federal government made an exciting announcement. The new Western Sydney International Airport would be named Nancy Bird Walton International Airport, honoring the legendary Australian aviator Nancy Bird Walton. Former Prime Minister Scott Morrison praised the decision, saying, "We now recognize Australia's greatest female aviation pioneer." But before the airport officially opened, on December 10, 2020, a light aircraft made an emergency landing on the construction site. This was the airport's first arrival, marking a historic moment before it was even fully operational. The true first official arrival came later, on October 2, 2024, when a Piper PA-30 twin Comanche landed at the airport. This marked the start of the airport's journey into full operation, but it raised a bigger question. How will this new airport change travel for Australians? And what will it mean for Western Sydney's future? Western Sydney International Airport is located 44 kilometers west of Sydney's central business district, and there are some serious concerns about its location. The airport is only 7 kilometers away from the World Heritage-listed Blue Mountains National Park. This has raised worries about its impact on protected wilderness areas, wild rivers, and the park's unique environment. Some people also fear that noise and pollution from the airport could harm the World Heritage status of the Blue Mountains. Local businesses in the region are also concerned about how it might affect tourism and the economy of the city of the Blue Mountains. Even with these concerns, the airport site was carefully chosen. It is within the City of Liverpool's local government area and covers a huge 700-hectare space. You know that the Australian government bought this land between 1986 and 1991 to prepare for a second Sydney airport. Now, decades later, this long-awaited project is finally becoming a reality. The work for building Western Sydney Airport is planned in 3 main phases. The first phase involves enabling works and earthworks. The second phase is the main construction of the airport. Finally, the third phase focuses on getting everything ready for operations, ensuring the airport is fully functional. For Stage 1, can you believe that when work first started on the site back in 2018, some of the workers showed up just for the food and a good time? It's true. The job was huge, and herds of sheep and cattle were brought in to help clear nearly 1,800 hectares of bushland. That's about twice the size of Sydney Airport. It turned out to be one of the biggest earth-moving projects in Australia's history. A massive 26 million cubic meters of soil and rock had to be moved to level the land. This was all done using 300 machines. To give you an idea of how much earth was moved, let's compare it to the Burj Khalifa, the tallest building in the world. The amount of concrete used for the Burj Khalifa was 330,000 cubic meters. That's just a tiny fraction, only about 1% of the earth moved for this airport. With the heavy lifting done, the more exciting part of the construction could begin. Contractors started laying down the runway, taxiways, and apron areas. These parts are vital since they have to handle the weight of planes carrying passengers, landing, and taking off from 2026 onward. That's why a whopping 4.5 million tons of high-quality crushed sandstone was spread underneath to create a solid foundation. This will ensure that the airport can handle everything it needs to, safely and smoothly. The runway at this airport is 3.7 kilometers long, but that's not the end of it. In time, a second runway will be added, running parallel to the first, on the other side of the terminal. You might wonder why there isn't a runway crossing over the main landing strip, just in case the winds change. Well, this is where years of careful planning have paid off. The winds in this area have been studied for decades. The experts found the winds here to be so predictable that they decided they wouldn't cause major problems for the planes. This kind of careful attention to detail helps make the airport safer and more efficient. As for the terminal building itself, it's huge. It spans 4 levels and covers an impressive 110,000 square meters. It's quite unique, almost like a unicorn in the world of airports. That's because it's the first airport to be built on a greenfield site in Australia in over 50 years. From the ground up, everything is brand new. One of the most striking features is the ceiling. Made from aluminum, it has been treated to look like timber. It's not just for show, though. The ceiling follows the natural curves and angles of the Blue Mountains, creating a design that ties the airport's look to the land around it. This adds a special touch to the airport's identity, blending modern architecture with nature. The roof of the terminal is designed to bring the feel of the Australian bush inside. It uses light filtration inspired by the experience of standing under a eucalyptus tree canopy. This design allows natural light to flow in, creating a calming atmosphere for those inside. The roof structure is built around a central spine, with blades spaced out in a way that lets light filter through the skylights above. Above this, there are catwalks installed. These catwalks allow workers to do maintenance, change lights, and take care of the ceiling without disrupting the flow of the building. Moving up from there, the outer roof is made from 3,500 tons of fabricated steel and more than 44,000 square meters of sheet metal. This makes the roof both sturdy and vast. Now, a roof of this size often comes with many joints where leaks can happen, but not here. The designers took extra care to avoid this problem. They used two of the largest sheets of sheet metal in Australia, each 75 meters long. These sheets were rolled on site and lifted into place using a custom-built lifting frame. This clever approach ensures the roof is strong and leak-free, creating a durable and reliable covering for the airport. Lifting a 75-meter sheet into place was no easy task. Just managing the logistics of using a spreader beam required careful planning. The spreader beam had to be engineered to support the sheet temporarily, making sure it didn't bend or flex while being lifted. Engineers also had to think about the wind loads, crane loads, and how all of this would impact the sheet as it was hoisted into position. It was a real challenge, but every detail had to be considered to get it right. After the sheets were in place, the roof was topped off with 6,000 solar panels. These panels will help power the terminal and the surrounding infrastructure, making the airport more sustainable. With this energy-efficient feature, the airport is ready for the future, supporting the environment and operations at the same time. Another good news related to this is that a new 23-kilometer metro line is being built as part of a huge upgrade to travel in the city. This line will have 6 stops, connecting Western Sydney directly to the new airport. Eventually, this will link up with existing services, helping people travel across a much wider area with ease. Back in 2014, the federal government, under Prime Minister Tony Abbott, didn't plan for a rail line. However, they did say that they would include space for a railway in the airport's development. This could include tunnels under the runway and preparing the land for a future station. As time went on, it became clear that a rail connection was needed. In 2015, Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull said the airport would need both road and rail connections to the Sydney Central Business District. This led to a scoping study in November 2015, looking into how rail could serve Western Sydney and the new airport. Both the NSW and Commonwealth governments worked together on the study. By September 2016, they released a discussion paper that laid out different options for a rail link to the airport. In March 2018, the final report suggested that 2 rail lines would serve the airport. The first line would be a north-south link, running from Schofields to MacArthur. The second, an east-west link, would connect Parramatta to the Badgerys Creek Aerotropolis, an area just south of the airport. The east-west link would likely extend from the already planned Sydney Metro West. As part of the plan, an extension of the southwest rail link would connect to the Badgerys Creek Aerotropolis. However, to reach the airport itself, travelers would need to change lines, either at the north-south or east-west link. Later that same month, March 2018, the federal and state governments signed the Western Sydney City Deal. This agreement marked the beginning of Stage 1 of the North-South Rail Link as part of the deal. Between 2019 and May 2020, the project was referred to as Sydney Metro Greater West by the Sydney Metro Agency. However, a project update on June 1, 2020 confirmed the new name, Sydney Metro Western Sydney Airport. Before June 2020, only 3 stations were planned for the rail line. These included St. Mary's, Western Sydney Airport, and Aerotropolis. However, by June 2020, 6 stations were confirmed for Stage 1, and by September 2020, their exact locations were finalized. A few months later, in October 2020, the project's Environmental Impact Statement, EIS, was made public for review. Since part of the construction would take place within the airport's boundaries, federal approval was also needed. The state government gave its approval in July 2021. Then, 2 months later, in September 2021, the federal government also gave the green light. In April 2019, during the federal budget for 2019 to 2020, the government announced a $3.5 billion investment for Stage 1 of the rail link. This funding also covered $50 million for the business case study of the North-South Rail Link and another $61 million for building the Elizabeth Drive overpass. Just a few months later, in June 2019, the New South Wales government also stepped in. They allocated $2 billion to kickstart construction, planning to use this funding over the next 4 years. Then, in June 2020, both the federal and state governments decided to speed things up. They pledged another $3.5 billion to start construction earlier, pushing the timeline to late 2020. With this extra funding, the design was changed to include 6 more kilometers of tunnels. By June 2020, the total cost of the project had reached $11 billion, almost double the money spent on the airport itself. In the end, they spent more to get people to the airport than they did to build it. Quite a move. The Sydney Metro Trains facility and the Operations Control Center will be set up in Orchard Hills. Meanwhile, service facilities will be placed in Claremont Meadows and Bringelly. To connect these locations, the rail line will run through twin tunnels. One set of tunnels will stretch between St. Mary's and Orchard Hills stations, while another will link the airport terminal and Bradfield stations. For construction, tunnel boring machines will begin drilling from Orchard Hills and the Airport Business Park. In the future, if the line extends south to Oran Park and MacArthur, that section will also run underground through tunnels. All of this is helping build a city on the rise, with its newest airport now more than 80% complete. But we're just looking at stage 1. There's much more to come. Over time, this site will grow and expand. It will transform from what it is now to something much bigger. The terminal building will be further developed, adding more space for passengers. Parking will be expanded, and there will be more areas for airlines to dock. Plus, there will be a second runway. This expansion is part of the vision for the airport, and it's all designed to meet the needs of a growing city. Even the way fuel is brought to the site is being rethought. Right now, it's delivered by trucks, but in the future, a dedicated fuel line could be set up for Western Sydney. This would make the airport more efficient and better connected to the needs of the region. However, patience is key. While all this exciting growth is coming, rushing to do everything at once could lead to a massive airport ready for 100 million people, but with demand only starting at 10 million. It's important to grow at the right pace to ensure the airport can meet the needs of the future without overextending itself too soon. And doing everything all at once would become very costly. Of course, a shiny new airport this big won't please everyone. Western Sydney Airport will be running 24/7, and some nearby residents are concerned about the flight paths. They're also worried about the impact on the Blue Mountains World Heritage status. However, the team behind the airport isn't too worried about that. While the flight routes aren't confirmed yet, we'll just have to wait and see what happens. In the meantime, construction is moving ahead. As each day passes, we're getting closer to the grand opening. But let's not forget, it's been a long and expensive journey to get to this point. Every step has taken effort, and it's clear that all the hard work will pay off when the airport opens its doors. We've got crane drivers on this project. Some of them are in their 50s now, but when they were kids, they grew up hearing stories about an airport here. Many of them never believed they'd see the day it was built. Yet, here they are, crane drivers working on it, making that dream a reality. The idea for the Badgerys Creek site was first proposed back in 1986, but it wasn't until 28 years later that it was finally given the go-ahead. That was a long wait, but huge progress has been made since then. For instance, Singapore Airlines, the first international operator, has signed a deal to fly in and out of WSI. After all those years of waiting, Sydney's aviation struggles are nearly over, and the solution is almost here. The new airport is the answer to the city's long-standing airport challenges. It's true that the airport's future depends on smart planning and solid infrastructure, like the new metro line connecting it to the city. But what do you think? Was it worth spending more on the metro than the airport itself? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe to our channel so you can see more videos like this. See you in our next video. Until then, take care and thanks for watching.